Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated. In each episode, we'll get together with other professionals and have fun talking about trust and estate matters. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Now here are the hosts of Simplifying the Complicated, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher.
Hello, I'm Lori Bolander.
I'm Lauren Gallagher.
Welcome to Simplifying the Complicated, where we talk about trust and estates and try to simplify some things around those areas. Today, we're going to simplify the complicated around appointing someone to handle your affairs. Since we do estate planning, we set up trusts and wills and powers of attorney and healthcare directives. We have this conversation with our clients frequently, if not daily, about who they're appointing, what the job is that they're giving these people. And we often recommend that they appoint somebody other than their family or their friends, somebody called a professional fiduciary. And we're going to learn all about that today because today our guest is a professional fiduciary. So our guest today is Stacy Baxter. Welcome, Stacy.
Welcome, Stacy.
And Stacy is a professional fiduciary in California. And Stacy, why don't we start with the big question? What is a professional fiduciary?
Sure. So in California, a professional fiduciary is a person that's licensed and regulated from the state of California. We have to follow a pretty strict code of ethics. You have to meet certain educational requirements and pass an exam. Go through a pretty intense background check, and then you have to be bondable. And if all those things happen, you can be a licensed professional fiduciary, and you are required to do ongoing continuing education every year to sustain your license. So we do report to the state of California Fiduciary Bureau annually on all of our clients, how much we are managing for our clients, whether it's trusts, estates, or whatever type of role we're filling.
And so you actually step in and serve as people's trustees or executors. I mean, what kind of matters do you get involved in?
So it can be trust administration, state handling state administration. Many times I serve as a power of attorney if someone's still alive and they just need help with things like bill pay or managing their finances due to capacity issues. We also many of us serve as healthcare power of attorney. So if our client doesn't have a friend or a family member that they can rely on, to do that, if they don't have the capacity to do that themselves, then a professional fiduciary can step into that role and make those decisions for them. I personally do a lot of special needs trusts as well. It's about 20% of my business. And then I don't think I missed executor there in that list, but that covers pretty much everything that I do.
And just in case people don't know what they are, but what are special needs trusts? Maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so many times there's it could be for a variety of reasons that maybe somebody was born. I have some clients that had, the parent had a difficult birth and they ended up injured at birth. Maybe it was a car accident sometime in their life, or they received a settlement. It could be for a many variety of reasons that the person is disabled. But the special needs trust really is a separate type of trust that protects them, their benefits that they're on. So if they're on Medi-Cal, Medicaid outside of California, or if they're on, maybe they receive regional center benefits or certain benefits that we want to protect, then we keep the trust fund separate in special needs trust, and that keeps them eligible to receive the benefits that they're on. And it's not counted as income. Basically, when we pay for things, only certain things though. There's a lot of rules around special trust, so I have to be careful.
Yeah, it's a very technical area of the law. We won't get too in the weeds on that, but I encounter, and I'm sure you do too, Lauren, clients that have special needs children and are frequently asked about having a special needs trust, and a lot of times that comes up even after somebody has died, because now the special needs trust beneficiary is supposed to get money. And what we do now is we give the trustee the power to establish that trust. So sometimes I think they can be standalone. Special needs trust that somebody sets up while they're alive for their special needs beneficiary, but sometimes they come up after death.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's an interesting little area of the law.
Yeah, it's important to have people like Stacy do that job because it is so technical. The average child, other child or sibling or friend isn't going to know how to comply with all the requirements and make sure that they do preserve those government benefits for that beneficiary. So, yeah, it's really critical to have people, private fiduciaries and other professionals be able to handle those kinds of cases.
Are there types of cases that you prefer being involved in, like, trust versus a probate or conservatorship or?
Easy ones. No, just kidding.
What'd you say?
Easy ones.
Yeah, right.
No, I actually enjoy a wide variety. I like the trust administrations. Certainly is a good amount of our business. I do enjoy special needs trust, working with those clients. I do really limit conservatorships just because they are really intense and time consuming. So for me, I just make a business decision to only accept one or two at any given time. But every fiduciary is different. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that specializes in conservatorship. So finding the right fiduciary is really key.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of fiduciaries that only do trusts. Like they won't even do anything that goes to court at all, which might be smart. But there's all kinds of different situations out there, and a lot of these people do need fiduciaries.
Yeah. Every case is unique too.
Yeah. And I know that you often get appointed in situations where the family has attempted to be the trustee or trustees, and that does not work out. And, I suppose that sometimes those cases can be challenging. But what do you find when you get kind of inserted in the middle of these family disputes?
It's always a good time. I do my best to remind everybody from the very beginning that, I'm not on anybody's side, right? I'm a neutral person and I am treating everybody equally in this equation. But sometimes, it is a little rocky in the beginning because of the family dynamics. And I think once people realize that I'm not, giving anybody any special treatment or nobody has the upper hand. My job is just to really handle, whether it's a trust or the estate, and get things handled. And I'm in there to do business and not to get involved in all that dynamic. So
sometimes they're better behaved when it's not a family member, right? They kind of on their better behavior. I wouldn't say best behavior, but better behavior.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It seems like sometimes because there's that power dynamic with the family, with somebody being the trustee, and it seems like sometimes once that's removed and there's this neutral third party, that it somewhat dissipates. Not everything, obviously. They can still have disagreements about distributions and who's getting the family Bible and whatever personal property disputes these people get in. But yeah, it's interesting that sometimes when you just remove that power dynamic, things can change a lot.
Yeah, kind of can bring things down. Like, okay, all right, there's not, Big Brother isn't the one in charge anymore. It always is, those family dynamics that started in childhood, like don't go away. And sometimes they're just magnified when, the power vacuum happens because mom or dad died. And, maybe that older brother is the power player, but sometimes he or she, doesn't matter who it is, isn't really, but it's perceived that way. So just putting that neutral party in there does at times just calm the situation down.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we suggest, a third party from the get-go a lot of times, because even our clients themselves, they don't necessarily know that dynamic, And sometimes it changes when mom or dad dies. I mean, I've literally had a client, say, I was nice to you while mom was alive, but she's gone now. And like, that's out the window. Never liked you. So it's kind of like, you're like, whoa, like, so I don't even know that the clients themselves know it a lot of the times.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is when we meet with potential clients in the beginning, I encourage them to tell me, like let it all out. Let me know the dynamic between the kids because I want to know what to expect. And that's an important thing for me to know. Maybe not granular details, but I need to know who kind of gets along and who doesn't. And it just helps along the way. So.
Well,
Well,
and
it
I
probably
find they do give you the granular details. Sometimes you're like, okay, I don't need to know that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it helps when and we feel like this with our own clients. Sometimes we approach that person differently if we know that they're triggered by a certain thing or they've had trauma in a certain way. It helps us be able to connect with them in a better, easier way if we have some of that information, which we don't always
Totally.
have, but it does help.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I know people always say, knowing what we do, they'll say, oh, yeah, once money gets involved, people get weird. And that is true. But, there's also a component of it like of grief. Like there's some people that can't process or deal with the loss and they just start acting very strangely. And sometimes it has little to do with money. Sometimes it'll have to do with power dynamics or, I took care of mom or, whatever. It's just, all sorts of different scenarios come up with the families. And again, the reason why a lot of times it's better to just have that third party and then you can avoid all of that and avoid going to court and avoid having the judge force you to appoint a fiduciary.
I have a couple cases where the adult child was so grief stricken and they were supposed to administer the estate, but didn't because of that. And, it's created problems because years have gone by and, property taxes have been reassessed, things that we could have avoided if a professional or somebody who was more on top of it was involved. So
Yeah.
it really helps in that way too.
Yeah, many times when we get calls, I'm actually named as the backup to maybe the child that they hope can handle it, but they've named as a backup just in case they can't do it. And that is true. We see people that they just say, you know what, I tried for a couple months, I can't do this. I don't have
Yeah.
time, it's too emotional for me. And so many times we step in a little bit after the fact when someone's
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, and I've had that happen too, and that's why, Lauren and I put in our documents, that if, they name all the people and then it's like, okay, if nobody can do it, then they can appoint a fiduciary. And I put that in all my documents because you do have families that the named person does not want to do it because the other thing that we haven't really touched on yet, but is it's a big job. Like this is like not something small that you're dealing with, whether you're, being the trustee and power of attorney and healthcare agent while somebody's alive, or whether you're administering the trust after somebody's died, they both have a lot of work and challenges associated with it.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely a lot of work and a lot of roadblocks and red tape, depending on the banks and the companies that you're dealing with. And yeah, it
Yeah,
can.
I mean, why don't you like kind of explain like, okay, you found out, your client passed away and now you're taking over. What do you do?
Yeah, so usually we're talking to anybody who has information about assets and things that we know we're going to be handling down the road. We do start receiving mail and taking care of their bills that are coming in. Many times it's a little bit of an Easter egg hunt because especially if there's not a lot of people to provide information for us, and the person didn't keep good records. I mean, I see such a wide variety, people that I meet with, prior to death, obviously when they're, doing their estate plans and they, some people are very super organized and they have everything documented for me. I love those people. And then,
So do
and then
we.
people that, maybe they just got the estate plan done and lo and behold, we found out they didn't change their bank accounts to a trust account. We've seen that quite a bit lately. So that causes a problem for us because it's not in the trust and, it's over a certain amount, then we have to report on that. But I'll let you touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's been a big issue lately. We've had several people pass away recently. That did not title their assets in the trust, which is something that we give them numerous oral instructions to do, and at least 2 written instructions to do, and yet it still doesn't happen. And I think I am not like, oh, these horrible people that can't do what they're supposed to do, but people get busy, and it sometimes is a pain to deal with a bank. And I mean, how many people actually go into a bank? I mean, people do, but a lot of people do not. Everything's on your phone, on your app, and this is one of those things you can't really do over your app. But they don't get it retitled, and then what the result is that we have to go to court to get the asset confirmed to the trust, and sometimes we may have to actually put it through probate. And either way, like, part of the purpose of them doing this estate plan was to avoid going to court and to make things easy, and that's just one more complication. Not to mention that, this Hegstead petition is what we call it, that to get the assets into the trust, somebody can object to a Hegstead petition. And I've had that happen before, where it was some nieces in this situation said, no, we object to the trustee putting that in the trust, because of course the trust didn't go to the nieces, it went to somebody else. And they said, oh no, we used to be the beneficiaries on those accounts, and we think that's what he still wanted. But they weren't the beneficiaries. But in any case, it ended up in litigation. I ended up with a settlement where they did get something. So it opens the door for those kinds of disputes anytime you have to go to court, because you have to give everybody notice, hey, we're going to court to get this confirmed to the trust.
I have a case that's the opposite, where he set up a trust and specifically disinherited certain people and never changed his bank accounts, and the accounts named those people. And I'm pretty sure that's not what he wanted, because he made a big deal in his trust about not wanting his accounts to go to those people, or his assets to go to those people. So yes, there's a big disconnect sometimes when they don't take it all the way and fund the trust. And then you, Stacy, and people in your position are left kind of going, well, what do we do? And a lot of times it's out of our control. It's out of your control.
I think the other issue that comes up with that is they'll have a distribution scheme that we can't fulfill because they didn't put the right assets in the trust. And sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm gonna make sure that my life insurance goes to the trust, or whatever it may be, and then it doesn't. And we have all these people we're supposed to give money to, and it just all these things, that titling of the assets into the trust is a big deal. And I think people don't really, understand how big of a deal that it is.
Yeah, and we a lot of that out along, probably the first month or two, I'll say. As we're completing, we do a full asset and liabilities, list, and working with the attorney, of course, pretty involved with the attorney to get to the bottom of any assets that we, are not aware of, try to find out information on it. And most often we actually get surprises like that, where it's not titled right, or maybe something pops up, like a life insurance policy that we weren't aware of, and we'll find it, 4 months into that nobody knew about. So there's things that pop up along the way, but we do our best to find everything out in the first month or so of a trust administration, and do our best to find out about anything as quick as possible.
Yeah. And sometimes they're good surprises, like, oh, look, we now found another $100,000.
Yeah. Sometimes they're bad surprises, and you find out that your client or the decedent didn't file tax returns or pay taxes for 5 or 10 years. And then, wow, that just kind of delays and throws a huge roadblock up in the administration, because really nothing can be done until all of that is resolved.
Yeah.
You just don't even have an idea what the tax liability will be. And, obviously you don't want to start making distributions until you have that all figured out. So I've got one of those cases right now.
Yeah, no, that's totally the tax situation. And it just even doing taxes as
Mhm.
well. Like I'm pretty sure 99% of, lay people serving as a trustee, when they become trustee, probably don't even know that the trust actually has to file a return because there's that problem too. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's always so important to have a really good CPA involved that can pull that information, tell you if they filed taxes. They're a critical part of the administration process. And we will have one on the show at some point as
Yeah.
well. To talk about all of that. But yeah, it's really important to check all those boxes because I had a case recently where the guy had passed away quite a while ago, and then somebody else had been the trustee, and then that trustee passed away, and we found out that trustee never did anything about seeing if the guy had filed taxes, and he owed $50,000
Oh, wow.
in
Yikes.
tax and back, from before he died. And, if we hadn't looked into that, we would have probably just wrapped this administration up, given the money out to the beneficiaries. And someday the IRS would have come knocking on the trustee's door like, hey, I need 50 grand. And then you do have the option to try to get it back from the beneficiaries, but good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Most of these beneficiaries have got that money spent before it ever hits their hands. So what other challenges do you see when you're administering a trust? I know sometimes the way the trust is drafted can be a problem.
Yeah, earlier you touched on that your firm puts in that a trustee can um, create a special needs trust if needed. So that was actually one of my thoughts, which you already touched on. It was that it's always nice to have that in there because I mean sometimes we don't even know, even though we meet with people before they pass away, and we know that there's a list of beneficiaries, but I may not know that that person has a special needs trust, and maybe the person leaving them the gift doesn't know that they have a special needs trust. And if we find out later, or maybe they're eligible for a special needs trust, and we want to prevent or protect their benefits. So there's many different reasons why that is valuable in an estate plan.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that when I'm drafting trusts and people say, well, why do we have that in there? It's like the person may not be disabled now. They could get in a car accident and become disabled. Like we don't know, what's going to happen in the future. And it used to be what we would do is like insert a whole special needs trust within our trust. But then an attorney that does a lot of special needs trusts said, it's probably better to just let the trustee create it at the time, because then we know what the laws are at the time. There might be certain powers the trustee needs to have because of this particular beneficiary. So we just give them that power. And, giving the trustee power and discretion in the trust over a wide variety of things, not just that, I think is so helpful because, and, sometimes when people are reviewing their trust, it kind of makes them nervous. I'm like, look, you want them to have all this power because you have no idea what can come up. I mean, between the three of us, I'm sure we can come up with some scenarios, some pretty crazy things that have happened that nobody would have ever thought that were going to happen, but they do, so it's important to, I think, have, the ability, some powers to do some things without going to court. Because of course you can always go to court to ask to be able to do things, but to have some powers and some discretions. Sometimes I have people that are like, well, I don't ever want to sell the house. It's like, but you have no idea what the situation is going to be. Like, what money is taking care of the house? Like, what if all three kids want the house? What if none of the kids want the house? Like,
Yeah.
Well, what do we need the house for?
We also have the potential other problem, which clients say, I want my trust to say sell the house. And then, then we have a housing crash.
Yeah.
And they've died that year, and the trustee is their arms are bound. They have to sell the property when the beneficiaries are saying, hey, we're in agreement, we want to hang on to it, we'll ride out this wave and co-own it, and we'll rent it out or do whatever needs to be done, but please don't sell it. And the trustees put in a really tricky position because they're required to. So we do want our trust to be pretty flexible. Now, what we don't give anybody the power to do is to change the beneficiary. So, that I think that's the main thing that we want to tell our clients is, yes, there's a lot of discretion in there for the trustee to do things, but the trustee cannot amend the trust. The trustee cannot change who it is that is, the beneficiaries who are supposed to get it. So the rest of it should be flexible enough to accommodate any of those wacky situations that come up that are completely unexpected.
Yeah. There's all kinds of interesting situations. And sometimes people think they just like throw out some scenario in their life and think it's not a big deal. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what? And then sometimes people make a big deal over things that like are so routine. And you're like, okay, yeah, this is fine. We do this all the time, So, but yeah, being too specific in the trust, I get some people that just like want to control everything from the grave. I'm like, it's just not practical and may not even be enforceable and may land everybody in court getting instruction from the judge as to how to get out of what you put in your trust.
It usually means lots of money spent on trying to figure out how to make that happen. I have one of those right now, and we have spent thousands of dollars and hours trying to make this plan work. And it's not even really working that great, but it's the best we can do given the circumstances. And I didn't draft that trust, obviously. And I wish that I had, but it really can result in so much unnecessary money and time when it can be avoided pretty easily.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Stacy, how did you get into this field?
So goes way back actually. When I was growing up, one of my friends, his mother was, she is a master guardian. So when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, they could not get rid of me out of their house. I just pretty much lived there every day after school and before school, you name it. And so her name is Irene Roush, and she is a master guardian out of Florida. And she was really, instrumental way back in the day. I mean, we're talking like probably 45 years ago, maybe even more, with
Betsy Del Pozo, Florida.
Yeah, exactly. So she was really instrumental in getting fiduciary or guardianship work formalized and licensing and certification, because back in the day people could do this and not have any training or a background that connected them to this type of work. And they could just kind of set up shop and go, hey, I can take on as many.
Yeah, I mean, California hasn't been that long that they've been actually licensing people, and we're usually kind of on the forefront of that. How long do you think it's been?
I think it's been like, oh gosh, I don't want to put the wrong date. Maybe 2000. I think it's been like 2000.
Really? No, I guess I'm getting old because that's long ago.
So I was just truly inspired from a young age by Irene. I would definitely call her my mentor. She is in her 80s now, and she probably will be mad at me for disclosing that, but she still teaches guardianship. She's still an instructor to teach new people coming into the field, and she's just amazing woman, super inspiring person. And I hope that one day maybe I inspire younger people to do this as well, because I truly love what I do.
That's awesome. This was not your background though. And you worked for another fiduciary for a while, which probably has some benefits just trying to hit the ground running without having any.
And I certainly came up, knowing a lot about the industry and, just my exposure to it over many, many years. But, my recommendation when I talk to new people that are getting in the field is absolutely go work under another fiduciary, do some time with them and get to know like what you're getting yourself into, I guess. But it is pretty intense work, but it's super rewarding. So, it's something we need many more people doing, I would say, based on
I know it seems like there's so many more fiduciaries these days, but it still feels like we need more because there's just this, huge aging population, lots of families out there ready to fight over things. So it's kind of like, get people in the game that are good because, like every industry, there's, great fiduciaries, and then there's so fiduciaries, and there's ones that you're like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. So it's like we need more great people, you know.
And that's a good point. That's why it's so important that, when people are forming their estate plans, that they're talking to the fiduciaries, like interviewing them, having conversations with them, making sure that they're a good fit. Because, if you're naming that person in your documents to be your trustee, your power of attorney, if you're going down that road with a healthcare agent because you don't have family or friends that can fill that role, and, they're really serving in all aspects for you. So you need to make sure that you feel comfortable with them, and that's who you want helping you.
Yeah, I feel like some clients, when we're talking about this, just in general, like who their trustee is going to be and who their power of attorney is going to be, they're thinking of it as like, who's going to do this when they're dead? And I always have to be like, no, this could be who's taking care of you, who's paying your bills, who's making sure that you have a caregiver. And people are like, oh, because I think when people think of trusts and estates, they think of death, right? But it's also a function, if you become incapacitated, then these people can step in and help you with your daily affairs. So it's kind of funny when people kind of like realize that. They're like, oh, so in that context, they're like, oh yeah, I absolutely want to talk to this person. And then also when they think about that, they're like, maybe that I don't want my oldest son because he's gonna suck at that. You're like, well, why would you think he should be your trustee when you die if you don't think he should be now? So, but
Sure, and I definitely
we're always
recommend.
trying to at least get people thinking about, who they're appointing and why, and educating them on the job that they're giving that person. Because I always try to tell them that, that is what you're doing. You're giving them a job. This is a lot of work. I mean, I've had clients that have had to take, a month off of work to be the trustee. It's just can be very intrusive into somebody's life. And that's what I explain to my clients too. I'm like, oh, I'm going to appoint my daughter. Didn't you just tell me she has 4 children under the age of 10? Like, you think she has time to be a trustee? No.
Yeah, and that's really what bounced me into this as a second career in my life, was because unfortunately my dad passed away. And so, I had to go through all this, handle it. And I'm an only child, so it was, it's all on me. And I had to handle everything. And so it kind of bounced me into the thinking of like, hey, maybe I actually am ready to, form this as a career for myself, rather than I was previously certified in Florida, but, didn't really do it for a living. And, so it kind of bounced me into the thinking of like, I'm ready to do this. And, it's a lot of work. I mean, my parents, my father didn't have a ton of assets, but I had to take a month off work, just to handle everything. And it wasn't really until I feel like I was one of those delayed emotional reaction people, when it was a family member. And I dealt with all the stuff I had to do first with the finances. And then when I finally got done with that, I was like, oh, now I can breathe, and so for me, it's my experience was I don't know how anybody would do this with a full-time job and 4 kids, in a scenario like that.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky because when I first started practicing, there were private fiduciaries, but there was just a handful of them. It really wasn't kind of common practice. The courts really weren't on board. I mean, they were fine with them, but it has evolved into such a big piece of our puzzle with our planning and with helping our clients administer estates. And it really offers something that maybe an individual family member or friend can't provide. And then the other extreme, which is a corporate trustee, they have their own place in our trust and estates world. But it's so nice to have a private fiduciary who's boots on the ground, who's available to talk to us, to talk to all the other professionals, the beneficiaries, can meet face to face. And you kind of lose that sometimes when it's the family member or friend for a variety of reasons, and when it's a corporate trustee. So I'm just thrilled that this has become such a big thing in our space. I think it does nothing but benefit our clients and us as the other professionals.
Yeah, and it really has. I mean, to the point where, I'm seeing fiduciaries come out of a mandatory settlement conference. The settlement conference judge is like, go call this fiduciary. I mean, I even was in court one day. I think I told you, Stacy, when and Judge Bostock was like, you guys need to go talk to Stacy Baxter. I think you need to appoint her.
That's
So,
a
I mean,
compliment.
you know, so that you're getting work straight from, you know, these professional judges that, you know, are like, yeah, this is the way to go. And the judges like it because, and I explain this to clients when I used to do litigation, you know, if they had like a co-trusteeship, you know, they're like, well, I want to get my brother removed as the co-trustee. I was like, see, but here's the thing, like you're going to go in and the judge is going to say, I'm just removing both of you because you're also the beneficiaries. And if one of you is the trustee, the judge knows you're going to be back in fighting over everything. So if they take that out of your hands and put that fiduciary in, then there's a bigger likelihood that this is all just going to get resolved and not come back to court.
For sure. And I think one of the other things, you know, just benefits, I guess, to throw in there is that, you know, usually we're going to be able to get things done faster than, you know, the average layperson, right? So, you know, we've dealt with these companies before more often than not. We know their routines, you know, what paperwork we have to fill out.
Sometimes you have a connection at the
Mhm.
institution.
Yeah.
Which is great when we do because we're able to bypass a little bit of red tape. But you know, it usually I find we're able to get things done faster than, you know.
Yeah, that's very good point. And I find that too, like when I've got individual client trustees, sometimes we end up doing some of their job because they don't know what to get the bank, what to tell the bank. So we end up getting involved, which of course costs the trust more money, right? And that's actually one way I sell it to my clients too, with you know, I was like, look, they're probably going to cost you less money because they know how to do these things on their own. They don't need the CPA for every little thing. They don't need the attorney for every little thing. You know, they actually, you know, yeah, they're going to take a fee, but so can your son, first of all. And also the fee is going to be less than, you know, all these other professionals also billing because they don't know what they're doing, you know. So yeah, it's good that this has progressed to where it is, because I think it's just such a great solution for so many people that, you know, and there's a lot of people in San Diego too that just don't have family here. I find that a lot. They're, you know, their kids aren't here or they don't have kids. I've had quite a few of those type of people lately. They don't have kids. They don't have a spouse, you know, they don't have anybody. Sometimes they've outlived them, you know.
I was going to say they've outlived them. Their, you know, family has passed, and they're kind of in a position where I have nobody to handle this, and I don't want to burden my friend, who, by the way, is 85 too. So,
right. Yeah, or my
Right.
sister who's 90. You know. Yeah, exactly. What do you think like your biggest challenges that you face are in when you're being the trustee or serving? What are the biggest things you face?
I'd say getting through the family dynamics, really, you know, I think we touched on that a little bit earlier. It really depends on the type of client that we're working with, you know, the situation. But in the ones where we're coming in and we didn't meet with the person before they passed, like I'm getting appointed on, you know, a case, or I'm coming into it later. I never met them before. We have to really like assess that family dynamic and kind of understand what's going on here. Many times, like what happens a lot is somebody, let's say our client is alive and needs in-home care, and maybe the son or the daughter is providing that care, and maybe they're taking payment for it, maybe they're not. But the siblings that are out of state are questioning whether mom or dad's being taken care of properly. So enter us into the mix, you know, however we got involved. Doesn't really matter, but you know, we get involved and it's so we have to really assess and see, well, is this, you know, son or daughter taking good, appropriate care of the mom or dad? Or do we have a problem here where we need to get, you know, maybe a professional caregiving company involved, which is a really good idea. Maybe we need a care manager to oversee, you know, maybe there's a lot of medical appointments, a lot of things that are maybe the son or daughter is dropping the ball and getting them to the doctor because it's more and more difficult. And I find a lot of times those family dynamics are the biggest hurdle that we have to get past, and just get everybody to kind of take it down a notch, and let's really just see what we're dealing with here, and then come up with a plan on how we can really take care of the client, which is at the middle of this, and the person
Yeah.
that's here. So that's probably the most challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are sometimes difficult situations. And sometimes you got like the lady from church taking care of them, and what happens if she falls and like
Oh,
hurts herself, so there's like employment law considerations, and people don't think about that. They're just like, well, Alice from church is great. I don't disagree. Alice from church is great, but
Mhm.
Alice from
and
church is
we've
not a
actually,
licensed caregiver, and you should have to give her breaks and all those kinds of things too.
yeah. And we've had, I've stepped in on many cases where there are situations like that, where there's unlicensed people taking care of, the client, and there's a huge liability. And, we're like, hold on, you can still, and if they're doing a good job, we can still keep you in that role if you're, things are going good and you're providing appropriate care. But we just need to make sure that you're getting paid. If you're taking money, you need to be getting paid on the books. It needs to be, taxes taken out. You need breaks, like you said, all those things. And we just want to make sure that we're not putting the trust or our client at risk
Yeah,
financially, accidents, or
exactly.
so.
And that's a hard job too. And I have seen situations where they're not taking breaks like at all. Like they have no respite whatsoever, even if it's like a child, and you're like, this, you can't do this. You're gonna end up, killing yourself.
Yeah, and we frequently have to remind people in that same situation where it's like a son taking care of the mom, or something, and he's really doing a good job, but we have to sometimes step in and remind them and say, you need to take time off. You can't do this 12, 18 hours a day, all hours that they're awake, like you need time for yourself too. So sometimes there's a little bit of, advice therapists in there, giving the family, some good advice on how to take care of themselves, because we don't want them to burn out.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing when you get a caregiver who's burnt out. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think a lot
Well,
of our job is being a therapist. It's
counselor at law.
it's the part I love the most, really. But just kind of touching on what you were saying, Stacy, I think some of the difficulty with those situations is people. It's just human nature to not really love change, especially when you're a little older and maybe feeling not 100%. You want to hang on to everything that has always been kind of status quo, and that change is scary, or in a completely different scenario, sometimes similar, in the same case, the kids don't want to spend the money to do it right or to protect the estate because, they're trying to save all the money, and my position is, it's your mom's money. She worked hard for it. It's there for her. If there's something left at the end, so be it. But we're going to do everything right, correctly, and, avoid all the liability we possibly can, and make sure, her situation or his situation is as best as it can possibly be, safest and most for their benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could have probably talk about this all day, the three of us. But I just have one last question. So that was like kind of the complications or the difficulties you face. What's the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, wow. For sure, helping people, whether it's my client who is still with us and just needs some help, and, being able to make sure that they get proper care and we're honoring their wishes and their estate plan, whether it's on the medical side or the financial side. But after someone passes, many times the beneficiaries, we talked a little bit about grieving, and just being able to do what we do for those beneficiaries so they don't have to do it. What I love more than anything is getting cards from, whether it's a beneficiary or whether it's the client, and they'll just take a moment and send me a card and just say thank you, for helping me, and thank you for for doing what my mom would have done if she was here, you know, and all those things. And, you know, those are the things that really, that little card, you know, I love getting them, and it really makes me feel good, and what I do matters, and really gives
Yeah,
back.
that's such a good feeling. And you don't get it from everybody either. You know, there's
Oh,
some
no.
people that are totally unappreciative.
No,
But, you
that's,
know, it's so nice when you do. And I feel like, you know, that's kind of how Lauren and I feel about what we do is like, you know, this area of the law, we actually get to help people. You know, we're not causing problems and filing lawsuits. We're helping people, and we're helping their families. So it's really a rewarding thing to do. And you get to really, you know, get in there and be boots on the ground to like really make actually big differences in people's lives, quite frankly. You
Mhm.
know, I know you've probably seen situations where people weren't getting cared for really well. And, you
Yeah.
know, so you get to really kind of make those big changes for them that can change things for them.
yeah.
So it's cool. Well, thank you, Stacy, for being here today. And hopefully for everybody that tuned in, they have learned something about trustees and professional fiduciaries. And we've given you some food for thought when you're thinking about who you're going to appoint. You can find Stacy through her website, baxterfiduciary.com. And of course, you can contact us through our website, lawgbs.com. And thank you again, Stacy, for being here. And thanks to everybody who tuned in.
Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Stacy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You've been tuning into Simplifying the Complicated with your hosts, Lori Bolander and Lauren Gallagher. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawgbs.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.